Horror movies have enticed millions of people ever since the first official horror movie. And today, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone watching, we will be looking at the best horror movies ever made. Movies like Psycho, Jaws, or Heretic, they're all great, but they won't be on here because that's just vanilla. But yeah, before we fully jump in, if you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, it's good to see you again. Alright, let's get into it.
Humble jigsaw puzzle can evoke lovely memories of Sunday afternoons around the kitchen table.
Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a 1987 British horror fantasy that was directed and written by Clive Barker. It was also his directorial debut. The movie follows Christy, her father, Larry, and Julia, Larry's lady, and they move into Larry's childhood home. Unfortunately for them, there's a squatter.
Frank's here.
Bastard! Frankie Boy is Larry's brother. And the reason why it's unfortunate is because Frankie here used a puzzle box that summons demon-like entities who derive pain for pleasure. These entities are known as the Cenobites, icons in the horror world and a major part of what makes this movie a masterpiece. Frank actually died at the beginning of the movie because of the summoning of the Cenobites. However, some blood landing on his remains, plus the weird voodoo going on, brought him back. However, his reincarnation came at a price, and he was forced to get blood sacrifices to fully reincarnate. Luckily for him, Julia, Larry's girlfriend, is promiscuous. Not only currently, but back in the day, she had an affair with Frank, because that's what good brothers do. Because Ohana means family.
Raising a child.
So now in current day, Frank is able to convince Julia of not only having another affair, but murdering people for him. Remember fellas, if she doesn't murder for you, she's not the right one. And poor old Christy has to deal with the reincarnation of Frank, and Julia and her adultery, which I think is technically necrophilia, but that's not the biggest problem right now. Because not only does Christy have to survive the whole affair with the dead person, but the Cenobites also get their fingers in the mix. Now, if that plot synopsis sounds a bit stacked, that's because it is, and it's awesome. The Hellraiser movie has so many iconic things about it, such as dialogue.
Jesus wept.
The kills in the movie are graphic as hell, and that was enhanced by practical effects usage. Awesome bad guys. But most importantly, I think Hellraiser is one of the most original horror movies that's ever been created, that dives into all types of sins that everyone falls into daily. But those Cenobites, they're not demons, nor angels, but rather purgatory tools that are being used by the Labyrinth box, mainly to see the extents of pleasure and pain, usually pain. And I think the most standout example of the Hellraiser movie being original are with the Cenobites, which are the most memorable thing about the movie. They're not the main bad guy. They're definitely bad, don't get me wrong. But the thing is, Frankie Boy here, he's way worse. Not only is cheating bad, and anyone who does that should be muted, but the whole making a deal with the devil and then killing people so he can reincarnate because he's pretty selfish, the cheating, and he's a bit racist. But luckily he gets his comeuppance. I know I swallowed it for you, but the movie's story and theme really carry it through. It's an oldie but a goldie, and I implore all of you to watch it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, what's your favorite part about it? Sinners. Is this movie on this list because of recency bias? Yeah, but it's also a good movie. Sinners is a 2025 splash vampire horror movie, written and directed by Ryan Coogler, and has earned all its praise that it's been given. However, saying Sinners is just a vampire horror movie is understating it. It is much more of a character-driven story, with a good amount of horror elements sprinkled in, but mainly in the latter half. And the movie focuses more on the characters and story building rather than the horror, but when the horror does show up, it goes ham. It follows a pair of brothers during the Jim Crow era, and they return to their hometown, Clarksdale, Mississippi, a very friendly place for black people at this time. The rampant, violently racist town and its members, who are part of this clan that picks and chooses when to wear masks, the KKK, isn't the biggest problem for the brothers. Well, at least at night, because that's when all the vampires come out.
Suck your dick, blood. I'll suck your blood.
The brothers want to open a nightclub that presents us with the amazing soundtrack that the movie has. It's full of blues and a little bit of jazz harmony. However, in pursuit of opening the nightclub, the brothers are not only hounded by the racists, but during the night of the opening, some unwelcome toothy visitors show up. Sounds like my ex. Horror movies that are focused on characters and the story, that's a gamble, because usually the horror movies have just stupid characters who get killed in fun, exciting ways. And that's the entertainment. With Sinners, it is so entertaining to just watch the characters grow and deal with everything around them. And it helps that the brothers, both of them, are played by lead actor Timothée Chalamet. By Michael B. Jordan, who you're almost always guaranteed a good performance from. Almost always.
He's mine.
But all of the supporting cast really make this movie not feel boring or slow-paced at all, which a lot of character or story-driven movies can feel like. But actors like Saul
On the
George,
dashiki, smoking the link licky, 10 freaky girls inside the gin tiki.
Haley Steinfeld,
We ain't gonna kill every last one of you.
hell, the little kid, Sammy, played by Miles Canton, who I'm pretty sure this is his first movie, or like acting performance in a movie, because I couldn't find anything else on IMDb. Like, all of these side characters, whenever they show up, they steal the scene. And that's not the easiest for any actor, especially like the newcomer, to outshine all these big dogs. And the amazing actors, on top of a story that is not only just good in general, but had good allegory, that didn't just hit you over the head with its message, but also incorporated it all throughout the movie. And what I mean by that is like merging different type of themes. So for example, you can question who's the real villain, vampires or the KKK? It's both. And with those vampires, you also got talks about cultural appropriation. And then these Irish Draculas are getting jiggy with it. What I'm trying to say is this movie's entertaining while also getting its message through without being like, hey, racism is bad. And here's a vampire.
So you're enjoying the rain?
It's such an enjoyable time with some very memorable scenes. And whenever a horror movie stays faithful to the lore of whatever monster or creature that they're adapting to screen, I have to give it even more props. Sinners isn't really on this list because of the horror aspects. I want to restate though that the horror aspects are really good in the movie, but I'm a tough nut and I wasn't scared. But the characters, acting, writing, and story all do heavy lifting here. And with a horror movie, that's not always the case. Like, how many horror movies are just like, here's a guy with a knife and he's gonna kill teens? Maybe he's mentally deranged, maybe he's just evil. Woo. Tourist Trap. 1979's Tourist Trap, directed by David Schmoller, is the epitome of the 70s and 80s campy slasher horror genre. It follows a group of chaps whose car break down during a road trip, and they end up in the palms of an extremely weird fella who has a nice little tourist wax museum. You know, just a run-of-the-mill horror movie. Oh, and the killer is a telepathic mass killer who uses his powers in multiple ways, but the most scary way is by manipulating mannequins to help him kill. Those mannequins being more alive than the eye can tell. So yeah, totally normal campy horror movie. There's a couple of reasons why it's on this list. But first let me get the cons out of the way, because this movie has a couple. It's definitely debatable for one of the best horror movies ever. I won't argue that. However, what I will argue is that I'm always right. Okay, so first things first. The acting is not great. The lines and how they interact is kind of weird, and it's enhanced by a weirder script. Like, the teenage characters, they don't have really any chemistry together. Which, yeah, that's kind of the case for most horror movies. And Tourist Trap definitely has some pacing issues. It feels slow at times. But with all that being said, I think the pros of the movie also incorporate the cons. As mentioned, I think Tourist Trap shines when it comes to the campiness. It isn't over the top trying to be goofy, like fart jokes or something stupid like that. But there's humor in the movie where the dialogue and the vibe is just very serious.
What are you doing?
I'm going to find her.
With a gun?
All right.
And sure, a lot of horror movies have humor in it, but what makes Tourist Trap stand out is the out-of-the-box idea of a Jedi-like killer
Woody?
who uses the Force to not only kill, but take control of mannequins, which is already a bit spooky enough. Imagine that killing you. That idea in a horror movie could go extremely wrong in execution. Especially being a 1979 film, you know, back in the day, back when they were like riding horses and starting the First World War or something. And the main scary thing about the movie is all the uncanniness. There's the uncanniness with the mannequins, with the whole story of the teenagers trying to build up trust with this weird guy. The vibe the whole time is just uncanny. And to top all of that off, the killer wears different types of masks all throughout the movie that just illuminate unease. When a movie can be campy, funny, kind of schlocky, and creative, that makes it an enjoyable and memorable watch. Yet on top of all of that, Tourist Trap is scary. And there's some genuinely scary deaths in this movie.
Your world is dark. You'll never see again.
That's always fun. Lights Out. Lights Out is a 2016 mystery horror movie directed by David S. Sandberg, and it follows a gal named Rebecca, who gets called to watch over her little orphan stepbrother. Martin's dad done got killed by an entity of supernatural being, and his mom kind of went crazy, so it's not the best housing situation. So he's technically not orphan because his mom's still alive. Throughout that movie, that same entity that killed Martin's papa haunts Martin and Rebecca, as well as crazy Madre over there.
Good night, Martin.
And the mystery of what the entity is and how to beat it is slowly revealed all throughout the movie. Granted, if you watch the short film with the same title that was released on YouTube, same title, same director, released back in 2013, you already know the supernatural entity. Her name's Diana. Hi, Diana. And she's an evil spirit, which is not good, because evil's bad. And during her life, she suffered from a rare skin disease, and couldn't face any sunlight or she'd get burnt. Which that disease transfers into the afterlife because she can only maneuver in the shadows and in the darkness. She can't exist with light, so right now she'd be screwed. But if I were to do this... Oh. I can't find the hole, it's dark. And side note, if I turned into a ghost after I died and I still had like whatever disease I had in real life, I would be pissed. Anywho, the premise of a horror movie villain only being able to move in the darkness is one of my favorite ideas ever. I loved it in the short film, and when the theatrical release came out, I had no other option to watch it in theaters, because if I didn't, I'd get beat. From an outside view, Lights Out can be seen as just another haunted entity ghost movie, and some horror fans may be thrown off by the PG-13 rating, as PG-13 usually means not as cool kills. And while there's definitely no extreme brutality or clutch your pearls type scares, you can definitely point out some flat characters. The play on the lights, not only for scares and suspense, but also for the climax, it executes it so perfectly for the guidelines it sets up for itself all throughout the movie. And with that, some of the smartest character choices I've ever seen in a horror movie. And quite frankly, that's really why it's on here, because there was one part where a guy had some keys and he was getting picked up by a demon and he was getting manhandled. And he pressed the lock on his key and the lights lit up and he was able to get away because light is bad. There's other choices too, but the characters are actually smart and I really appreciate when it's not easy to kill someone. Creepy, twitchy villains has kind of gone played out through the horror genre, especially within recent years. But with Lights Out, it's way more endearing than I think Pennywise just being like, woo! Lights Out doesn't shake up the genre or anything like that. But a lot of the tropes that we love in horror movies, I think this movie executes perfectly. And on top of that, I think Lights Out is a great intro into horror. If you've seen Lights Out, do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know. And if you haven't seen it, then, do yourself a favor and waste away an hour and a half of your life. Onibaba. Onibaba is a 1964 horror fantasy classic. Directed by Kanito Shindo, it's set in the time of 1400s, where there's a war in rural area Japan. It follows a mother and a daughter-in-law. And the son of the mother, Kichi, which is the husband of the daughter-in-law, he's at war, so he's mostly out of the picture. And by mostly, he's not in the picture. This leaves Kichi's mom and his wife to fend for themselves. Also, that's what they're called, Kichi's mom and Kichi's wife. They have to fend for themselves at home as they try to survive the impact of war as civilians. And how they do that is like how any other normal person would. They kill wandering samurai, put their bodies in a giant hole, mine's almost filled up, and then they take their gear and then sell it or trade it. We all got a side hustle. However, tragic news bestows upon Kichi's mother and his wife. One of Kichi's fellow soldiers, and actually a neighbor, Hachi, informs the ladies that Kichi has died. And conveniently also tells Kichi's wife that, hey, I know you're kind of crying about your husband dying, but damn. And Kichi's wife, after a little bit of grieving, she's also like, yeah, I need some If I died and my wife found a new love within a week, there'd be proof that ghosts exist. I'm not saying she can't move on. I'm not like that. It's kind of weird. I'm saying give it some time, a couple thousand years. Did our relationship mean nothing? Anywho, Kichi and Hachi start banging. Or, not Kichi's dead. That'd be weird. Kichi's wife and Hachi start banging. However, Kichi's mom is adamantly against this. Not only because, the mom's like, you just married my son and now that he's dead, again, you didn't even give it a week. But it's also messing up their little killing side hustle they got going on. Now, this is a good place to let you know that Onibaba dives into themes of envy, wrath, lust, and heavy on the lust, and betrayal. As Kichi's mom has much more of a traditional point of view. especially when it comes to like sex and lust. Meanwhile, Kitschy's ex-wife, she falls into her sexual desires, and the film explores each side of it, all while not having too much dialogue. You might be thinking, hey, it's a horror movie. Where are the scares at? I don't know. Maybe I just threw a drama in for the hell of it because it's a good drama. However, it's a good time to let you know that Onibaba is much more of a drama rather than a horror. And it dives into human psychology, with a lot of nudity. Like a lot. But it makes sense in the movie because it explores the themes of lust, and everything that comes with it, not only for Kitschy's wife and Hachi, but also Kitschy's mom. And the impact of all those three in their relationships with each other. But all that being said, it's just a heads up, if you do watch this movie, I don't want you to be thrown off like halfway through it and you're like, man, I haven't seen anything scary. The scares show up halfway through, mainly in the third act. Yet it builds off the previous first two acts, which were mainly drama, exponentially well. Not only with the play on the weird love triangle, with Kitschy's wife running off at night to meet up with Hachi to talk about God. Meanwhile, Kitschy's mom has resentment, not only because she thinks Hachi let Kitschy die, but because of the whole shebanging. But it also works off the atmosphere. There's only a couple of different settings throughout the movie, and they all play extremely well off the shadows and the black and white and gray. We've seen all throughout the movie that Kitschy's mom and his ex-wife have to explore long grass fields just to traverse through their area. And the small homes that they have just have a darker tone inside. And all throughout the first two acts, it's just been a drama in that area. And then all of a sudden it just flips a switch where it's like, alright, time to be scary. The story, dramatic themes, and atmosphere all culminate into Kitschy's mom's worst nightmare. Her biggest fear with Kitschy's ex-wife running off to Hachi was that she would be vulnerable to any soldiers that would be wandering throughout the fields while her daughter was off making demon stew. And a samurai soldier does appear during that vulnerable time. And look at this bad boy. This mask is a Hanya mask, used in Japanese theater to portray a jealous lady demon, although right now it's being worn by a male soldier. And before this ghoulish samurai executes Kitschy's mom, she lures him to the big old pit that they've been killing and dumping all the bodies of previous soldiers that they've murdered, and gets away with her life. And looking at his corpse and his gear on, she has a little light bulb moment. She dons the mask the samurai was wearing, thinking it will help her scare away her daughter-in-law away from Hachi. And don't mind the fact that the mask was like glue on that first guy. That shouldn't be a problem. You might have thought that the soldier who was going to kill Kitschy's mom was going to be the scary antagonist. But nope. It's actually Kitschy's mom, as her attempts at scaring Kitschy's ex-wife away is some of the most scariest scenes and iconic scenes in all of horror. In this rampant acceleration into horror from the first acts of drama, it comes full circle in an amazing way. And with that, the love triangle concludes in a poetic way. Spoilers alert for a movie that was released in 1964. As Kitschy's mom tried so violently hard to convince her daughter-in-law that there was a demon hag, or an Onibaba, in the fields, only to become said Onibaba. If you are a horror fan, I can't recommend this horror movie enough to you. Again, it takes its time getting to the horror, but once it does, it's such a payoff. If you agreed or disagreed with any of my picks, then let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video at any point, then leaving a like really helps me out. It helps the channel grow, and it makes me smile. And if you're new here and you think I earned your subscription, then make sure you hit that button before leaving. Alright, I'll see you next week. Bye.
Mauricio, I can't move it anymore.